Thanks to Bob Bailey's initiative back in the August timeframe of last year to put together this 19th century baseball speakers series. And the idea he had was to do one of these once a month. And to get this thing up and running very quickly, what we did was we decided for the first season, and basically the season is like an academic year. It's a September through May timeframe. And for the first season, we would rely most heavily on past Fred research presentations and go to some of those presentations that we've seen at the Fred that were particularly engaging. And one of the ingredients was they had some good visuals to accompany them. And we began to invite individuals to participate. So far, this is now our sixth monthly speech research presentations. And the earlier ones, it started with John Popovich, and then went to Joanne Hobart, then it went to Bill Humber, and then it went over to Tom Schieber, and then last month, Don Jensen. So we've really had some really great presentations. They have, been very gratifying to kind of see them.
Put a little pressure on me.
Careful, I'll mute you.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce, of course, Bob Bailey. I'm going to say a little bit more about what the future of this looks like, which you'll all find out within several days and within several weeks. But in the interim, I'm going to introduce Bob, our vice chair and newsletter editor, and my secret weapon. And Bob will give you a little bit of the ground rules here, and we'll get underway.
Thank you. We're going to a couple of notes here as we go through this. There's a little feedback from somebody on there. You might want to, if there's some noise in your background, please mute yourself. We're not. Somebody's having a conversation that's coming on through. If this keeps happening, I'll just mute everybody, and Jerry, you'll have to unmute yourself when if I do that. Now there'll be no questions during the presentation, but you can use the chat function at the bottom of your screen. Just click chat, and you can type anything you want in. We'll monitor that and feed those to Jerry at the end of his presentation. Other than that, we're going to get ready to go here. Tonight's presenter is Dr. Gerald Casway. Jerry is a longtime professor of history at the Howard Community College in Columbia, Maryland. He recently retired with the position of Chair Emeritus of the Social Sciences Department. His academic focus primarily dealt with modern Irish culture and history. But for several decades, Jerry has been an active contributor to the work of the 19th Century Committee here at SABR. In addition to articles published in numerous SABR publications, he's been a regular attendee and presenter at the annual Fred Conference in Cooperstown. And of some note, Jerry was the very first presenter at the very first Fred back in 2009. He's gotten better since then. Jerry's also produced several books on baseball topics, including Ed Delahanty and the Emerald Age of Baseball, and the culture and ethnicity of 19th century baseball. Both are well worth reading. His topic tonight is Before There Was Greenberg, There Was Pike, a look at the life and baseball career of the 19th century Jewish star Lipman Pike. So Jerry, if you want to put your screen up and get your slides up, we'll get started.
Well, how do I?
Just go to screen share. Hit screen
share. Okay.
And click on your slide.
Technology.
There you go. Now go to that full screen at the bottom where it says slideshow. there you go. You're ready.
Okay. Is my audio on?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm glad to see everyone is well and is enduring the pandemic. And I'm sure I speak for a lot of people. I certainly miss not having the Fred and seeing everybody, and particularly our cigar session that Joanne orchestrates. I'm going to talk tonight about the checkered career of Lipman Pike. The title that Pete gave is the chapter in the book, which covers the life of Lipman Pike. And to the best of my knowledge, it's the only full biography, again, of Pike. You can read that in chapter 4 book. And the other, I saw someone had a copy of it in the background, is the children's book called Lipman Pike, America's First Home Run King, by Richard Michelson, illustrated by Zachary Pullen. It's a very nice little book. Not much depth to it, but it's worth looking at and introducing youngsters to the legend of Lipman Pike, the Iron Batter, as he was called. What I want to do tonight, as I said in the summary that was advertised by Bob and by Pete, is that I don't want to necessarily repeat the career and exploits again of Lipman Pike, but to talk about Pike as a 19th century Jew, and probably the only known Jewish ball player in the 19th century. I know there's been rumors about others, but a lot of that is just not correct. I remember once reading something about Billy Nash being Jewish. Boston third baseman, later to play with the Phillies. And what's interesting about that, he apparently took off a day which happened to coincide with the high holidays. And because it coincided with the high holidays, it made the assumption that he must be Jewish, but he's not. Anyway, that's it. So what I want to do is look at the checkered career of Lipman Pike and examine his career and his experiences and see whether they match up to any kind of relationship with his being Jewish. Now, the topic of Jews in baseball is a popular but limited topic. Aside from Hank Greenberg and Sandy Koufax, most Jewish players are significant only because of their presumed faith in its accompanying culture. Almost forgotten in such compilations was how the career of the first prominent Jewish ball player, Lipman Pike, might have been affected by his faith. That's really what I want to talk about this evening. Now, Pike was raised in a Dutch Sephardic New York home. His father was from Holland. His mother was a native New Yorker. Pike's home life provided him with the traditional Jewish values. His developing interest in baseball created a considerable amount of friction within his household, which is oftentimes repeated in other ethnic households in terms of fixation playing baseball. However, during his career, he seems to have maintained ties with Jewish communities in the cities where he played. And upon his retirement, became an active member of the Temple Israel Synagogue in Brooklyn. So he never loses that affiliation, although he's not a character who goes around promoting it. But being Jewish was Pike singled out because of his faith in an era when racial and ethnic bigotry infected American society? That's the question. Now, during Pike's career, Jews stereotypically had neither an athletic reputation or virile identity. They were viewed as aloof, bookish, non-physical people, distinguished by their alien clothing, language, and beliefs. O.P. Kaler, who knew Pike well, this is the columnist, addressed ethnicity in a Sporting News editorial. He explained why Jews did not play baseball. Kaler suggested that, quote, it may be that the indolent life of the diamond is not in accord with the constantly active ways of the true Hebrew. And it's interesting that often they didn't really refer to him as being a Jew, but always being a Hebrew or a son of Israel. There's different ways in which they would characterize him. Now, Fred Lieb, another sports journalist and writer, went further in his diagnosis. It was my theory that the Jew did not possess the background of sport, which was the heritage of the Irish. For centuries, the Jew, in his individual business, had to fight against heavy odds for his success. It sharpened his wit and made him quick with his hands. You know where this is going. Therefore, he became an individualist in the sport and a skillful boxer as a ring strategist. And just like today, many minorities look for a quick accolades and successes in sports, particularly boxing. In the early 20th century, late 19th century, was also seen to be an area where Jews tried to excel or did excel. And then to continue the quote, as a ring strategist, but he did not have the body to stand out in a sport, which is so essentially a team game. I'm not sure I really understand what Lieb is getting to there, but I guess they're just not good teammates or were not cooperative enough to be on a team sport. Now, these archetypes, like those linked to other ethnic groups, colored popular perceptions. In his narrow-minded world, how much of a factor was Lipman Pike's faith linked to his professional experiences? It is possible that current day researchers are more predisposed to associate Pike's religion to his career decisions than contemporaries. For example, some investigators attribute his playing for 11 teams in 13 years between 1865 and 1878 to religious alienation. His career may say otherwise. Pike did stand out among the players of his era, but were his professional experiences any different from other coveted ball players in the pre-reserved clause age? And that's an important factor. In the pre-reserved clause age, in which most of his career was played, ball players, again, very freely went where money and opportunity happened to be. And Pike had the misfortune of playing for weak franchises. And since franchises ultimately could not maintain their solvency, he was constantly looking, again, for the opportunity to have a career and, of course, to make money. So perhaps an examination of his checkered playing career may disclose any alienation or prejudice motivating him to jump to different teams. But in doing this, we have to consider other factors. What about salary opportunities? Professional biases. A lot of people, at least initially in the 60s, looked down upon people who were professional, didn't trust them. Business prospects and managerial aspirations. All these are factors in the career decision-making, again, of Lipman Pike. More importantly, as I said before, in an age of revolving meaning the jumping from team to team, other teams, all players in a non-reserve age went where the money was. In other words, were Lipman Pike's motivations really different than his Gentile counterparts? And that's what I want to try to examine today, this evening. Okay. All right. The most frequently expressed explanation for Pike's revolving, or jumping to teams, was that he was an outsider, a Jewish ball player. In his younger years, before he was established as a player of some renown, Pike might have been susceptible to the era's bigotry. Remember, ball players were not well educated and, like society as a whole, put off by diversity. We may never know how the young Pike was affected or estranged by these attitudes. Only a review of his career can hopefully shed some light on this issue. Now, specific anti-Semitic documentation directed at Pike, however, is not extant. The closest expression to this came late in his career when National League president William Hobart criticized Pike for fielding errors he made in an 1881 game after he came out of retirement to play a few contests for the Worcester Ruby Legs. Now, Hobart accused Pike of making deliberate errors at third base that cost his team the victory. Hobart went out of his way to say that Pike was, quote, been notorious as a shirk, a fraud, and a beat. He made trouble with every club that hired him. He also described Pike of being a, quote, worthless, ungrateful, low-life whelp that the league will do well publicly to throw him overboard by means of a published blacklist. He didn't think too well of Pike. Hobart charged that, quote, he must pin it home to him to make him pay for his malicious errors.
Good, really good.
Why was Hobart so critical of a retired player who had come off retirement to try to help friends in a floundering franchise, which was the Worcester Ruby Legs? We know that Hobart had a history of drinking binges and that once committed himself to an asylum for alcohol abuse. Hobart was also a vocal opponent of revolving. And this is something that goes back to the early 1860s or the mid 1860s, when players were starting to be make money, be paid, be given a job or opportunities for their playing services. And he was against that, an outspoken critic again of revolving, players jumping from team to team. He also was a great opponent of hippodroming. The hippodroming again was betting on baseball, throwing games, or conducting other distractions besides baseball, races, different types of contests that would distract again from following baseball. So he was an opponent of revolving, jumping to teams, and hippodroming. And he responded to these actions like a contentious autocrat, which he was. Now, could it be that Pike had an identity of being associated with abusive teammates that colored Hobart's opinions? This explanation is plausible because there are no other characterizations in Pike's entire career that comes close to what Hobart said about Pike and Hobart's condemnation of Pike as a shirking malcontent. On the contrary, he was anything but that. Now, Lippmann was known to be a strong-minded and opinionated athlete who was frequently repelled by the high-handed policies of those who ran the professional leagues and by teammates who abused the sport. Regrettably, Hobart never took into consideration Pike's age, which was 36 at the time of the Worcester incident, and his idleness, being away from competitive baseball. These factors were never considered for Pike's fateful errors. In the end, Hobart's blacklisting might have been motivated by prejudice, but there's nothing to substantiate his other claims. Now, some of what Hobart alluded to may also have been a carryover from a time when professionalism was a demeaning condition. Condition. As a 20-year-old, Pike was invited to play in 1875 with the renowned Atlantics of Brooklyn. This was a picture of the Atlantics. This gentleman in the middle is Pete O'Brien, famous captain and quasi-manager of the Atlantics. This is John Chapman, also a very successful manager and captain. And here is Lipman Pike. This is Pike. Hopefully you can all see my arrow. Lipman Pike, John Chapman, and
Yes.
Pete O'Brien. This is another composite of the Athletics of Philadelphia with, again, the Atlantics. Here's Chapman, and here's Pike. I don't see O'Brien. I don't know why. Anyway, so Pike is a 20-year-old in 1865, played with the renowned Atlantics of Brooklyn. The following year, Pike was enticed with money to play for the Athletics of Philadelphia. He was lured by a $20 a week contract in 1866, and he joined Outreach and Pat Duckney. Here's Outreach, later becomes the president of the Phillies. He's a sporting goods manufacturer and entrepreneur, and the creator of the modern baseball, the Reach baseball. By the way, the Reach baseball and the Spalding baseball are the same baseballs, were just made by, produced by a different company. And they made the agreement what would be used in the American League and what will be used in the National League. That's beside the point. Anyway, so Pike joins the Athletics, and he joins the ranks of Outreach and Pat Duckney. After a successful season with the Athletics, which included a 5 home run game against the Alerts of Danville, Pennsylvania. What's interesting is that in the obituaries, they always credit him the 6 home runs. And that became popular in many secondary books as 6 home runs. But in the actual box score, he scored 5, he hit 5 home runs and made 1 out. This hands and lost, which are basically outs that they made. And these are the runs that they scored. So he made 1 out and had scored 8 runs. And he was responsible for that by hitting 5 home runs. Now, what's interesting, this game took 3 hours and 10 minutes, right? Look at the score, 67-25. And we have pitching duels today that go over close to 4 hours. This was 3 hours and 10 minutes. They scored, almost 100 runs. But this is the box score in which he had 5 home runs. So if there's a trivia contest and they ask who hit the most home runs in a game, again, the answer could be Lipman Pike, because he hit 5, not 6, but 5. But Pike was also caught up in 2 controversies. Some of the directors of the athletics were unsettled by the practice of paying ball players. So even though the athletics were pioneers in the paying and subsidizing of ball players, there were members of that club, including Tom Fitzgerald, who was the president of the club and also the editor and owner of the Philadelphia City Item, which had one of the better sports pages in the country, was an opponent, again, of paying ball players. He believed that professionalism diminished the fraternity of ball playing. He and others were wary of the loyalties of such players. And he kept referring to the fact that Pat Duckney and Pike were accused of toadying to the New York teams. Well, both of these players, including Reach, were from New York. They knew all these players on the New York teams. They had played together. And the fact that they were now playing in Philadelphia did not mean that this was a bad thing. They were just acting friendly. They didn't throw a game. They weren't gambling on the game. They just happened to be patronizing and dealing with members of the opposition. Others called these professional players foreigners because they weren't from the locality. Eventually, the Athletics retained Al Reach, a New Yorker who had moved to Philadelphia, set up a prosperous cigar ticket business before he went into manufacturing. And they ultimately would release Pike and Duckney, leaving the team to be primarily one of native Philadelphians, with the exception, again, of Al Reach. Now, the vestige of this controversy would have cast the stigma on Pike's career. So Pike, from the very beginning, is associated with professionalism and all of the characteristics that are applied to that definition. Now, until the professional era of the 1871 National Association, Pike, like others, played where the money and opportunities were. Looking out for his financial well-being, Pike moved to New Jersey, first to Irvington, and then to the Eurekas of New York. After an undisclosed falling out with disrupted older Eureka teammates, Pike signed on with the Mutuals of New York. The Eurekas responded negatively and tried to expel him and forbid him from playing in any association game for 30 days. The Mutuals got around that and avoided the suspension by calling their games, quote, social contest. So as you can see, factors that are beyond his control lead to the dissolving again of a ball club, and then being cast out on his own, trying to make the best deal possible and getting all kinds of negative feedback as a result. This is a picture of October 1866 game between the Athletics, who were at bat, and the Atlantics, who were in the field. This over here is Lipman Pike. There are small numbers over their heads. This is Lipman Pike. The guy over here at the scorer's table, the hat on, that's Pat Duckney. And I believe this character here is Al Reach. So Duckney and Pike ultimately will be released by the teams. Pike came to the Mutuals because of Boss Tweed of Tammany Hall fame. Tweed followed the precedent set by the original athletics, using patronage and subsidies to attract talented ball players. Tweed gave Pike a token job, paying him $1,200 for the year. Now, he didn't have a job. He was just being paid under the table $1,200, which was equivalent today to about $17,000, $18,000. Now, Lippmann remained in New York through the 1870 season, getting paid $1,200. But the Mutuals were poorly run, and hippodroning accusations disillusioned the 23-year-old Pike to the point where he was actually threatening to get out of baseball. So it's the players, older players he's associated with, who bring certain habits and characterizations to the ball club, which weaken the ball club, which is, again, always associated with Pike, who was constantly moving from club to club to club. Now, pursued by a number of teams, Pike remained in New York and joined up. There's a close-up of Pike. Pike remained in New York and joined up with his old club, the Atlantics of Brooklyn. This relationship did not last. The Atlantics refused to join the new professional national association. So now they were beginning to recognize professionalism. The Atlantics would not join a league that was associated with professionalism. And of course, Pike has been a professional for at least four to 5 years. Now, many of Lippmann's teammates, again, on the Atlantics, such as Dickie Pierce, George Zetline, and Joe Stark, were also semi-professionals, and they re-affiliated to new ball clubs. But when Pike did it, he has this stigma of a revolving player, cast a lot of negative characterizations on him. Now, the 26-year-old Pike was now recruited by the unions of Lansingburg, New York, who relocated to a larger market in nearby Troy, where they were known as the Haymakers. Regrettably, the team was identified with hippodroming, so again, gambling and throwing games, and much of the unsavory side was linked to club president, a man here, John Morrissey. What people don't recognize is that John Morrissey was also the heavyweight champion of the world. He beat John Heenan in a very famous bloody match for the title, and then he retired. And they went into, as a protege of Boss Tweed, he went in, it became a well-connected owner of racetracks and gambling houses. So you can imagine the racetracks and gambling houses as his major source of income, that how his teams and players would be associated again with him and his reputation. So a protege of Boss Tweed, Morrissey did what he could to sweep up talented players like Lipman Pike. Initially, Pike signed on to be captain manager. This is interesting. He had such a bad reputation. Why are teams from here on out trying to sign him as captain manager? Captain manager. He held this post for a few games until he was put off by the duplicity of Morrissey and his teammates. Again, Pike was identified with the team and players who maligned the sport. He played out the year, but the ball club was badly in arrears and stock subscriptions were lagging. So another failing franchise. Under these deflating circumstances, Pike wanted out of New York and was lured to the new and hopefully respectable Lord Baltimore franchise, known as the Canaries. Pike again was paid $1,200 under the table play for the Canaries of Baltimore. They played in yellow uniforms. Their stockholders also frequently rewarded successful players with expensive gifts and jewelry. Many of the club's investors encouraged Pike to move to Baltimore with its thriving Jewish population. He even opened a popular downtown cigar store. So he really merged into the community of Baltimore. Now, the team's successes extended into 1873 until a failing national economy doomed the franchise. To attract fans, the ball club conducted special events, sort of hippodroming. What they did is they sponsored races, and the most prominent race was Pike, who was very, very swift of foot, ran against a racehorse for 75 yards. And the racehorse was given a little while to gather up speed, and Pike still won the race. He was involved in many other races. Another famous race was against King Kelly. King Kelly challenged him to a race, and in a railroad station, they had this race, and again, Pike won decisively. So hippodroming was a big thing here. But such come-ons could not offset the team's deteriorating finances. The New York Clipper reported that the franchise was $7,000 in debt, and all players were given permission to pursue employment elsewhere for 1874. So again, a successful franchise becomes a failing franchise, and again, Pike is on his own. On December 6th, after the team disbanded, Pike wrote that he very much regretted the situation. He said he was truly gratified and comfortable with the many courtesies and favors shown to him. Pike said he had previously turned down many offers to leave Baltimore and would gladly return to the Charm City if the team regained solvency. This setback did not deter the 29-year-old Pike from seeking a more dependable and beneficial position. So again, the franchise is pulled out from under him. Again, he's released. And again, he has to find the best circumstance for himself. Shortly thereafter, Pike signed on to be the captain manager, again, captain manager of the Hartford Blue Stockings, or the Dark Blues, that were owned by Morgan Buckley, who was the first president of the National League. But now, the Dark Blues were not a very good team. They suffered from injuries and illnesses and were plagued with drinking problems and player defections. So again, moves into a franchise that does not have the best of reputations. Players' defections, drinking problems, etc. Neither did inclement weather help the team's prospects. Attendance suffered, and another one of Pike's ball clubs floundered because of off-field problems. Pike had a successful year in spite of the team's losing record. Unfortunately, Pike found himself at odds with many of the contentious players on the Dark Blues. And it came as no surprise that in 1875, Pike went over to the fledgling St. Louis Brown Stockings. Now, St. Louis started out well, but by June, they were upended by Harry Wright's Boston Red Stockings. They fell to fourth place, 26 and a half games out of first. The 1876 season was a watershed one for Pike. The National Association, with all of its financial and organizational problems, was supplanted by the National League. And the 32-year-old Pike recognized that St. Louis was looking to reorganize the ball club, and the salary and position were now expendable. Pike took his chances and signed on again to be captain and manager of the hapless Cincinnati Red Stockings. This is the famous Cincinnati Red Stockings that were the first team in '69 to go professional. Cincinnati had many past their prime veteran players who knew and played with Pike. Levi Meyerly, Candy Cummings, Ned Cuthbert, and Bobby Matt Matthews. And it was hoped by Cincinnati that Pike, since he knew these players and played with them, quote, could harmonize and discipline this incongruous team. This expectation was not fulfilled. The Reds finished 25 and a half games behind Boston. A frustrated Pike stepped down as captain after 14 games. He did finish the year strong and again led the league in home runs. This was his fourth title. He'll have 4 titles in, I think, 7 years. So although disappointed, Pike resigned with Cincinnati for the 1878 season. This would be his last professional year. The end came after 31 games on July 9th, when an ailing Pike was released by the Reds after they had signed the young prospect, Lewis Buttercup Dickerson. Pike was batting .324 at his termination. Pike wasted little time and signed with Providence, where he played 5 games. On August 7th, Pike went 0 for 4, but he made 3 errors and was cut the next day. Remember, this was a man that he moved from the outfield to third base. He wasn't in the best of shape. He was still ailing. And again, the propensity to make errors at third base obviously was not something he was familiar with. So unable to make a clean break with the sport, Pike signed on as captain manager of a team in Springfield, Massachusetts. When the team disbanded, another, franchise that was not solvent, disbanded, Lippmann linked up with Albany in the National Association. He stayed with the ball club until that franchise folded. Afterwards, he played some games with the Unions of Brooklyn and the newly formed Metropolitans of New York. He even played home games for the minor league Atlantics and for Hartford in 1881. It was here that he played those infamous games with Worcester that provoked Hobart's wrath that we talked about earlier. Now, what conclusions can we draw from his checkered career? Perhaps Pike was self-absorbed and was always trying to free himself from the unregulated practices of organized baseball. But how was Pike any different from other ball players of his era? Many of his decisions were beyond his control and had nothing to do with him or his faith. He happened to select, fragile franchises and that were in difficult shape. His teams folded and franchises accommodated the prevailing economy, leaving players like Pike to find their own way. Some ball clubs were part of a larger and more pressing organization that did not prioritize the sport. We saw this with Morrissey. We saw this again with Ross Tweed. As a result, Pike was cast off and fended for himself in search of a team that wanted and could afford his services. Was he a bad and disruptive teammate? Evidence does not reveal such behavior. Most teams and most people who were discussing Pike spoke about him as being a gentleman and his gentlemanly behavior. So you put that with a bunch of players who were malcontents, who were disgruntled veterans, who were heavy drinkers, and you can see where the problems ultimately are going to come from. And the thing is that, remember, at least 3 teams hired him as a captain manager, which was a responsible position that wouldn't be given to such an obstructive or distractive person. Neither was Pike accountable for the character of the ball players he was hired to manage. Here's your team, manage them, win with them, and he did what he could. Pike seems to have been a well-respected and had many lifelong friends and connections outside of his faith. Most attendees at his funeral in 1893 were from politics, public services, businessmen, a lot of old ball players, and many members of his congregation in Brooklyn. His procession required 2 carriages and had 30 floral arrangements. They all acknowledged the class and style he brought to a sport that was not known for its sophistication. In summary, baseball for Pike represented an economic opportunities and reliable employment. Playing baseball was a career gamble on his part and a sporting passion. Lippmann won the life gamble in spite of his alien background. What can't be substantiated is that his career suffered because of it. Thank you very much. Pete, open it for questions or comments or what?
Yes, if you'll turn your
I should zoom out.
your screen share out, we'll go to some of the chat.
I got it.
comments. The first that we got, there was an answer type. When you held up the 2 books, the question was, what was that first book you held up? And
The first book is my latest book by McFarland, The Culture and Ethnicity, 19th Century Baseball. And in it, chapter 4 has a full biographical study, again, of Pike, in which it's turned before Greenberg, there was Pike. And I go into much more detail about Pike and his career, his accomplishments, his actually playing of the game. The second book I held up, Harry has as a background to his video image, and this is a children's book, Lipman Pike, the Home Run King. And there's another picture from the book, from the back of the book. And it's written by Richard Michelson, illustrated by Zachary Woolen. And it's not that deep. But it talks about how a person with his faith and background and cultural values ultimately moved into a sport that was not known for its sophistication or for its culture. And his mother's there, his father's there, working in the store as a haberdasher is there. And again, this is the picture that Carrie has behind him. The iron batter. He was a power hitter before the age of power hitting, the dead ball era. I once traced his 5 home run game, and 5 home run game, most of them were inside the park into deep center field. And I think 2 of them actually went out of the ballpark, out of the Columbia field at 17th and Columbia in Philadelphia.
We got a couple of
So,
comments. One from
Carrie, how would you describe the book? You have to put you on your audio.
I just downloaded the book today,
Oh, okay.
so I have not had a chance to read it, but I will probably later tonight.
I picked this up at a used bookstore. I saw the book for the first time in Cooperstown in the bookstore. I don't know whether they still have it. I think it's now in paperback. But it's an interesting book, and it's a book on Lipman Pike.
good. Jerry, also,
Can't hear you.
The audio's down, Bob. The audio is down.
okay, well, I'll turn it back because I'm up over 80. Okay. Here's hoping that this is better. We had a couple comments on other Jewish players in the era, Nate Birkenstock and Mr. Goodman from Pittsburgh. Any comments on those?
To the best of my knowledge, okay, I don't believe they were Jewish. They were probably German. But I don't know. The only one that really gets much attention is, again, Pike. And you don't see attention to a Jewish player until, what was it, that guy's name, Cohen, who played for McGraw at the beginning of the 20th century.
Oh, Andy Cohen.
Andy Cohen.
Yeah, okay. There was a couple of comments on the illustration that you had with the, I think it was the Atlantic and the Athletic, where Pike is in that little group of three sitting on the ground. There was one note that there's looked like somebody was strangling a spectator. The speculation was that it's a pickpocket was getting there, and the further speculation was that the pickpocket was Eric.
Actually, it was because of a brushback pitch.
Okay, there's a comment.
But that particular picture is a fascinating one. One, it shows the crowd and the gambling and the shenanigans of the people involved in that. But at the same time, it troubled me initially because Pike seemed to be sitting out there by himself, and I thought that might be an expression of his alienation. And it might have been. This is 1866, and he's being attacked by Fitzgerald for his professionalism. So it could very well be that he felt sort of ostracized by the group.
Perhaps as you had Reach in 65, then you had Pike, and you're going to have more of the Atlantics moving to Philadelphia in 67 on the Quakers. But nevertheless.
Well, like I said before, it still carried that stigma. And one of the first people to bear the brunt of that stigma was Pike.
There was also a comment from Paul DeFonso about that it's rather impressive that he kept getting signed as a captain manager for his abilities, and it would seem to, as Paul says, seems to belie the claim of unpopularity, at least effective. He was an effective manager. Yeah.
Well, like I said before, the relationship with the franchises is beyond his control. And he went where the money was, but they all did, just like they do today. But the key is that, three teams wanted him as, captain and manager, which has to say something for his character and his abilities. So,
Yes, I think you're right. Now, there was a question. What was Pike's occupation after his baseball career?
Haberdasher.
Men's clothing.
He went into the same business that his father had started, haberdasher, and they used to give a free suit to the Brooklyn player who was voted the most popular. But he still played baseball. He had a bad heart. He dies when I think he was 43 years old or whatever. And he goes to, he still plays ball on the weekends. He wants to umpire games. So he was still very active. He was a haberdasher.
Okay. And there was a question about would Pike have had a longer career if he had hooked up with Harry Ryder in Boston or Cap Anson in Chicago?
Probably. I mean, he was a decent ball player. I mean, he was more than a decent ball player. He was a good ball player. And his power was there. But the teammates and people that he was associated with just dragged everybody down. But having some discipline would have been very good for him. I mean, he might have got that initially from Pete O'Brien, the early Atlantics, but he was 20 years old.
There's a question about how many of Pike's 21 career homers were inside the park. Do you know?
I would think that given his speed and the size of the outfield greens, that most of them were inside the park. But there are a number of instances, particularly when he was in Cincinnati, where he hit balls that were apparently quite significant in terms of their distance. And he was noted for that. That could he hit a ball as far as Eric? I don't know.
A couple of comments here. There's a question, will this presentation be recorded? It is recorded and it'll be posted on the SABR website within a day or two after a little bit of editing to put it together, as long with the slides will be posted also.
And excuse me. And is the check in the mail?
Yeah, absolutely. It's coming by Bulgarian mail courier.
Eric, did I ask the right questions? The check in the mail?
Yes,
also,
that's the right question.
If everybody will look at the near the end of the chat line, there's a comment that there's a blog post by Tom Schieber about the picture with the pickpocket in it, and there may be some comments there that you can hit the link and it'll take you to his comments.
Well, those ball games were notorious for attracting, characters that would again play on large crowds, and that particular drawing and depiction shows both the positive and the downside again of these large gatherings.
Well,
21,000 people were at that ball game.
That's a big crowd in those days. We'll finish with this question on the general theme of talk. How rampant was anti-Semitism then? Is it similar to the anti-Black feelings?
Well, I did some reading in preparation for this presentation, and apparently until the Eastern European Jewish migrations of the 1890s and the early 20th century, there weren't that many Jews in the United States, and they didn't attract the same kind of attention that the Irish did. And the Irish again and Catholics came in for more, abuse than they did. And then of course we have the Italian migration. So the Jews either were too small of a number, or they hid behind the larger ethnic groups' numbers. But for the most part, by the time you get to the 20th century, anti-Semitism is much more of a factor because of the large influx of Eastern European Jews.
Jerry, thank you very much. We appreciate your time, your effort, and the wonderful presentation.
Anyone have any other questions?
There's a couple of questions in the chat. You can reach Jerry through his email on the SABR website. And at this point, we'll turn it back over to Peter with a few closing comments.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
Jerry.
Thank you, Jerry. Jerry was the lead-off presentation in the very first Fred conference. And I asked him if he remembered what I said to him after he gave his presentation. And he actually didn't. But what I said to him was, I remember, I said, all I wanted you to do was get on base, just get a single, but you really beat out a double.
Well, actually, the ball hit the wall. It was a ground rule double. Well, thank you guys for attending. I hope you learned something. And I congratulate Bob and Pete for doing this. I think we should do more of this. And See my agent, Bob. I'm available.
You're
So
so
we're-
gracious.
So I want to give you, in about 2 or 3 weeks, about 3 weeks, actually, our spring newsletter will be coming out. And a lot of the details about, what I'm about to tell you, a lot of the details of that will be in the spring newsletter. But very briefly, we have 2 more presentations to wrap up our season 1. And next month, Chip Martin from up in Canada is going to be doing a presentation on the 1887 Wolverines of Detroit. And he's going to do Kidnapping Their Way to Glory. That's the presentation. So that'll be a lot of fun, I'm sure. Alan Cohen, who's I saw here and commented earlier, Alan was going to be our May speaker, but he had a conflict.
I have a paying gig.
But his conflict is very valid because it's it turns out to
Getting
be
paid, that's what.
opening night for the Harvard Yard Goats.
Hey, it's a name.
That's right. You can't miss that. Hey, you're doing better than the Staten Island Yankees. So the Yard Goats took Alan away from us. But what we do have is we have our vice chairman ever at the ready. And this was planned by us to have some kind of a backup if we needed one. And actually a very good one because Bob gave this presentation at the Fred a couple of years ago on Jack Chapman, A Baseball Life. Is that 19th century baseball life, right? And
John Chapman,
Yes,
we showed you the picture.
yes, yeah. He and Pike had some similarities in the path they traveled.
Yeah. Well, he managed so many different teams.
Oh, he had a 42-year career in baseball.
Yeah. That's
So
also
as
in the book.
so as I began
Talking
to,
about- Talk
by the
about
way, I
that
wrote a review
managers.
for that book. I enjoyed it very, very thoroughly. The other thing I wanted to mention was I had started off this evening talking a little bit about how we had selected past Fred presentations. So what we're going to do for season 2, we have about 4 former Fred presentations but we have 9 months that we're going to be engaged, September 2021 through May 2022. So what'll be coming out tomorrow actually is a call for abstracts for the season 2 season. And you have until about mid-May to return the abstract. So if anybody is interested, of course, it's just the same general rules as the Fred. Of course, you have a little more time here. The Fred, you're kind of constrained to about a 20 to 25-minute presentation because of our tight schedule up there and space. But here we have a little bit more of a luxury, so you can kind of submit something, that could be up to 45 or even 50 minutes. So you keep that in mind. But you'll see that all come out tomorrow in a call for abstracts. I think the deadline for that is May the 15th. Not to be confused with our Fred. So around July 1st, we'll be getting our normal Fred call for research presentation abstracts out. And you have about until October 30th to prepare those. I wanted to mention that we are planning to have the Fred live, and that'll of course be in the newsletter in 2022. And of course, I'm working with the Hall of Fame now for those April, a couple of April dates, and I have the caterer standing by, and she is always done a great job for us up there.
I'll get some fresh cigars, Joe.
I was just about to say, we got to plan ahead,
I know.
but not too far ahead.
Okay, I'll get you later. And we'll talk a little bit about, I just want to mention that the newsletter will again, this coming newsletter will again give you the information to register if you haven't already. Of course, some of you were already registered by virtue of being in the 2020 registration for the FRED, but you can register on the SABR website. The directions are right in the next newsletter. And that weekend, actually what we're doing are 3 research presentations on Thursday night. And then the rest of the program will be Friday and Saturday. And of course, it'll be in all time zones. It'll begin around, I think, about 11:45 in the morning Eastern time. You'll get that information. So keep an eye out for that if you want to attend the FRED virtually. It'll be one price for the entire 3 days. I want to just say a word about the Brooklyn Symposium. It really is coming along better, probably better than we even planned. And we have a date in November, Saturday. It'll be all day Saturday. It will be something that you'll be able to chime in on the following day. We're going to be, it's most likely going to be a virtual event. There's a lot of apprehension about coming into a Brooklyn setting and, you know, having to do with the pandemic. However, what we will be doing is a virtual historic tour, historic baseball tour of Brooklyn. Yeah, so that's something that we're working on right now, and it'll be actually videoed over the course of several months at different locations. And what's kind of neat about it is we were planning a Sunday morning, much like we did in New York, that Don ran for us at the historic Madison Square District. But here we have, doing it virtually is going to give us the advantage in this case of being able to really go around Brooklyn and get that footage and it'll be narrated by Tom Gilbert. So we have a really great opportunity here in a way. So if you sign up for that, you'll see that as a Sunday morning option. Okay, that's about all I want to say. I want to thank Jerry again for the presentation on Lipman Pike, and Jerry has been a very, how should I say it, a very spirited SABR member since the moment I met him when I was a very neophyte researcher and asked him a question about Brewery Jack Taylor. And something that Jerry told me, and it is so true, you never know what you're going to find. That's been the fun.
Joanne told me that.
Yes, that's right. And I keep digging stuff up. The stuff finds me. I bet it does you too. I just wait for it to show up.
By the way, if you're not a member of the Boston chapter, I am, because I'm a Red Sox fan. I was a Brooklyn Dodger fan, so I could never warm up to the Yankees. But anyway, but if you manage to sign up for the Boston chapter, you'll see Joanne's postings, dispatches from Mudville.
Can we see Joanne's x-rays?
Yes, yeah, really. Yes,
And they're really excellent. They're excellent reading. They're a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And
you can get one this week in SABR also.
Bob's giving me the cut sign, and I'm going to cut it off.
Is Joanne related to the Hobart in the 19th century?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Eric. I'll talk to you.
Miss you guys. Stay safe.
Bye-bye.
Right.
Catch you later.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
stay safe.
Bye-bye.
All right, you too.
Bob, thank you. Pete, good job.
No, thank you, Bob, for all the technology there too. Thank you, Jerry.
Okay.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Howard, I'll talk to you in a few minutes. Give you a call.